Hi, welcome to our second video from Sagebrush Coffee. Thank you for listening and for watching the first one. I'm here to tell you a little bit about roasting coffee. Before we talk about roasting coffee, I think I need to talk to you a little bit about what coffee is. Coffee grows on a tree. It is kind of like a cherry, if you think of it. It grows as a cherry, and so the process of taking a cherry all the way down to a bean that we grind up and drink into coffee is quite significant. There's something like, I think, 10 different steps between seed and cup of coffee, 11 steps actually. And so the step that we do at Sagebrush Coffee is really just the roasting step, one of those 11 steps. The steps that are done ahead of us go anywhere from growing the tree to picking the plant to processing the seed, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and then down to milling and prepping and sending to us, the roasters, who taste it and decide which ones we think are the best, and then turn into roasted coffee that we sell to you guys. What I want to talk a little bit today is about what that roasting process is and what that cupping process is and how we turn amazing coffee beans into something that you guys think is good coffee, that you guys enjoy as good coffee. The first step is to really just look at what we would consider, for lack of a better way of putting it, bad coffee. That's the coffee you get out of a tin can at Safeway. That coffee skips a lot of the steps, or if not skipping the steps, they just don't take the kind of care that we want taken into a coffee bean. And so we'll have coffee come into our shop that will be raw green coffee beans. We'll roast them up and we'll try to decide whether these coffee beans are the best coffee we've ever had and good enough to sell. Roasting coffee is not new. It's been around for hundreds of years. Good coffee is actually pretty new. In World War II, I think most of the coffee was instant coffee, and so if you think that what we've turned coffee into in the last 70, 80 years is what we have today, it's pretty staggering how fast this industry is moving. If you look at Peet's or Starbucks and kind of the emergence of those businesses, and really they started in the 70s, that was when origin was actually even thought about as it relates to coffee. And so you're probably thinking, oh, my favorite coffee is Colombian or Costa Rican. And it was not that long ago that people didn't even recognize what origin the coffee came from. They just knew it as medium or dark roast. Peet's Coffee was the first company that said, hey, we want to bring origin in front of the drinker, in front of the consumer, and have them think about that as it relates to coffee, because the different origins have a significant flavor impact on the coffee. The soil impacts it, the processing method impacts it. A lot of coffees are grown in volcanic soil, which has a significant impact on the flavor. And so Peet's Coffee wanted to do that and bring that in. That brought a whole different world that is considered the second wave of coffee. And that is the wave of coffee where you have your quote-unquote gourmet coffee beans that define based on their origin. And then probably 15 to 20 years ago, the third wave of coffee came. And the third wave of coffee is the slot that we kind of fit ourselves into. It's where it's not just related to origin, but we look at a lot of things as it relates to the origin. We look at the processing method, we look at the elevation, we look at the individual farm and the milling and the miller and say, okay, is this the coffee that is able to give us consistent processes year over year? Do they really put their heart and soul into these beans? And it's staggering the amount of work that goes into these coffee beans at origin. And that becomes what has become the third wave coffee roasters. Within the third wave, we try to trace coffee all the way back to the country and the farm of origin. Or not just the country of origin, but all the way back to the farm of origin. And so most of our coffees are able to be traced back. Now, some countries do a better job of that than others. Jenna actually wrote an entire blog post that's worth reading that talks about how that's tracked in Kenya and how the government has really kind of infused itself and limited that and helped that in many ways. It's a really interesting case study to look at what happened in Kenya. Papua New Guinea, which we actually don't offer very many Papua New Guinea coffees because of this, the farms are so separate and so remote that a farmer will grow his coffee, process his coffee, walk it down to the nearest road, and just wait there for days until someone drives past and sell his coffee to the first guy that'll buy it. As you can imagine, consistent coffee processes, being able to trace it back to the farm just doesn't happen in that. And so there are places in Papua New Guinea who are able to trace it back that way and help infuse those roasting practices, but it's not nearly as consistent as some of the more developed coffee countries. So we have, at Sagebrush, have built as many relationships as we can with the actual producers of the coffee, and that gives us the ability to work with them year over year, to give them feedback. I have some coffees right now that the farmers are waiting for feedback as we're getting ready to launch them, so that we can help them improve their coffee processing, improve their coffees year over year. So then my job as a coffee roaster is not to add anything to that coffee. I want my coffee to put on display what the producers are doing, and I think that's very important. My coffee roasting process for a bean is, call it 15 minutes. It's just not significant compared to what the producers are doing to make that same cup of coffee. I'll taste a cup of coffee, I'll have a coffee come in, and we'll sample it, and we generally roast it just shy of medium, probably on the lighter side. And that gives me an opportunity to taste what that coffee can produce and decide from there where I think it really stands out. And some lighter roast coffees tend to have more fruity flavors. Darker roast coffees tend to have a deeper chocolate and nutty flavor. So when I taste that light to medium roast coffee, I'll think through, okay, do I like the darker flavors in this? Do I like the chocolatey flavors in this? Would I rather it have some of these fruity flavors? Is the fruit gonna contradict some things? And so I'll think through, what do I want this coffee to taste like? And then we'll make the call, okay, this coffee is going to stand aside as a light roast. And so a lot of people email me and ask, hey, can you customize this coffee? I want this coffee, but I want it roasted darker. We've actually gone through the process and decided each coffee is roasted at the way where we think it's going to represent that coffee the best and represent what those producers have done in the best way possible. That really is a significant piece of what I feel like we add to the process. Up front, we get a new coffee in and we decide where we think it's going to shine at its best. So as we talk about our process of deciding what roasting profile we're going to use with the coffee, we then take some programs that we've written in-house to help draw out those flavors on a consistent basis. There are a lot of ways you can roast coffee. You can roast coffee in a 70 kilogram roaster, have someone sit there and plot out the chart and try to hit that chart consistently and watch the time and temperature, smell, use all their senses to roast, and that's one way to roast. We've actually decided that we want to roast using our senses as much as possible, but also using this software program that we've written. What we try to do is know there's some portions of the roasting process that are very consistent, roast after roast after roast. And so what we want to do is have those consistent portions of the roasting process to be as consistent as possible. But then there's parts of the roasting process that have a huge impact on the flavor of the coffee. And with those, we want to use our senses and use our skill to try to draw that flavor out. In the last 90 seconds of each roast, that's really when the coffee roaster is doing their job. And they're making sure that the coffee is developing and getting to the place where it needs to be as close to that end as possible. I mentioned that one of the ways to roast coffee is in a 70 kilogram roaster. That is not the way we roast coffee. Most of our roasters are really small. We actually have decided we want to keep our roasters as small as possible so that we have the flexibility and can keep the batches as small as possible, because I think that really helps the coffee shine. And so we used fluid bed roasters. I think I'll probably write a blog post all about that and talk about that later. But we use fluid bed roasters. They're very small. We have a series of them, which means the roaster has that 90 seconds of focus is very significant. But I think that gives us a product that stands apart. That's one of the reasons we do that. And that really ties everything together. What I want you to experience is the best coffee you've ever had in your life. We work hard to pick the best coffees we can, to choose the best roast profile, and to consistently bring that to you guys every single time. And that's, I think, the key to what makes Sagebrush Coffee different, and I think that's really what we add to a significant months-long process in our 15 minutes of roasting. That's really where we kind of hit the nail on the head. So, thanks. Thank you so much. Be sure to subscribe. Ask any questions or comments that you have below. We're putting these videos together at, right now, probably a rate of a couple a month, but we'd like to do more and more. And so the more ideas we have for videos, the better we'll do. Thanks.